Hello everyone, this is Sonal Mishra, student of class 10, standing over here to give a presentation on the topic of human nervous system from the chapter Control and Coordination. So firstly we have to understand that what is coordination. So the working of various organs of an organism to adjust various activities of the life is called coordination. Control and coordination ensure correct movement for each specific change and no wrong or unnecessary actions. Control and coordination are of two types. First, coordination in animals and second, coordination in plants. In coordination in animals, we have two types. First one is nervous system, which is associated with the neurons, and second one is endocrine system, which is associated with the hormones. And in plants, we have plant movement and plant hormones. So today we will study about coordination in animals. As we know, there are two types. First, nervous system, and second one is endocrine system. In nervous system, again we are having the two types. First one is central, which is also called CNS, and second one is peripheral, which is also called PNS. In nervous system, in central we are having our brain and spinal cord, and in peripheral we are having two types of nerve. First one is cranial nerves, which arise from our brain, and second one is spinal nerves, which arise from our spinal cord. And in endocrine system, we know that we have hormones. So now we have to understand one more term, which is stimulus. So any change in our environment, which is internal or external, that produces a response in an organism is called stimulus. For example, any temperature, any light, smell, etc. Then we have to understand about receptors. So receptors are the cells or the groups of cells present in our sensory organs that detect a stimulus and convert them into nerve impulses. So there are mainly 5 types of receptors. First one is photoreceptor. Photoreceptor is present in the retina of our eye that detect light and help us in vision. Second one is phonoreceptor. Phonoreceptors are present inside our ear that detect any vibration sound. Third one is thermoreceptor. Thermoreceptors are present in our skin that detect any temperature, that something is very cold, hot or moderate. Then fourth one is olfactory receptors. Olfactory receptors are present inside our nose and which help us to smell something. Then the last and the fifth one is gustatory receptors. Gustatory receptors are present in our tongue that help us to taste something. Then we will know about response. So response is the reaction to a stimulus by detecting it. And then we have effector. So effectors are the part of the body which respond to a impulse by converting them into actions. Suppose if we are touching a very hot object, then we withdraw our hand because we know that it can harm our hand. Then our next topic is neuron. So neurons are basically the basic structural and functioning unit of nervous system. They are specialized cells that transmit the information from one part of the body to the brain in the form of electrical impulse. Then we will study about parts of brain. In parts of brain, firstly we have the nucleus. The nucleus is present inside the cell body that controls the whole functioning of the neuron, and it also contains the genetic material, which is also called DNA. Then the second part we have is dendrite. Dendrites are the branches like extensions that receives the impulses, or we can say that receive the information and passes it towards the cell body. The third part is cell body. In cell body, it processes the incoming information and passes it towards the axon. And we know that axon is the longest nerve fiber present in the neuron that processes the information from the cell body to the nerve ending. And the last part of the neuron is the nerve ending. Nerve ending is the end part of the neuron from where the chemicals are released and the electrical impulse is then converted into chemical impulse, and after crossing the synapse, it is again converted into electrical impulse at the dendrite of the second neuron. Then we will study about synapse. So synapse is the gap between the two neurons, means the ending of the first neuron and the dendrite of the second neuron, and it is a site where the electrical impulse is converted into chemical impulse, and then after that at the dendrite of the second neuron it is again converted into electrical impulse. Then we will study about myelin sheath. So myelin sheath is a fatty layer around the axon of some neurons, and it acts as the insulating layer, and it fastens the transmission of the information. Then we will study about types of neuron. So there are basically three types of neuron. First one is sensory neuron, second one is motor neuron, and third one is interneuron. Sensory neurons carries the message from our sense organ to our brain or spinal cord. Motor neuron carries the message from our brain or spinal cord to the muscle or gland. And the interneuron is also called relay neuron, and its main function is to connect the motor neuron and the sensory neuron. Then our next topic is types of action. So there are basically three types of action. First, involuntary action, second one is involuntary action, and third one is reflex action. So voluntary actions are the actions that we can control by our own will, means our thinking and our brain are involved in this action. Like actions like running, dancing, writing something, learning something are voluntary actions. Then involuntary actions are the actions that we cannot control by our own will, and our thinking or our brain is not involved in this type of action. Involuntary actions like pumping of blood, controlling our blood pressure, and vomiting, salivations are the example of involuntary actions. Then the most important action is the reflex action. So reflex action is a sudden, automatic and very rapid action which protect our body from any injury or any harm. Then in reflex action we have one more topic, which is reflex arc. So reflex arc is the pathway of the reflex action that connect the sensory neuron and the motor neuron. As you can see here, when a hand touches a very hot object, the sensory neuron carries that message to the spinal cord, and after getting the response, the motor neuron carries that message again to the effector for the action. And you can see here, it is a relay neuron that connects the sensory and the motor neuron. Then our next topic is human brain. So human brain is present inside the bony skull, which is also called cranium. It is covered by the three membranes called meninges with a fluid called cerebrospinal fluid, which acts as the shock absorber and protects our brain from any damage. Then we have parts of brain. So there are three parts of brain. First one is forebrain, second one is midbrain, and third one is hindbrain. In forebrain we again have three parts. First one is cerebrum, second one is hypothalamus, and third one is thalamus. And in hindbrain we have three parts: cerebellum, pons, and medulla. Firstly, we should understand about one more term, which is corpus callosum. So corpus callosum is a thick band of nerve fiber present in our brain that connects the two halves, means two hemisphere of the cerebrum. Its main function is to connect our left and right brain and to allow communication between these brains so that they can work together. Now we will study about parts of brain. So forebrain. So forebrain is the largest part and the most complex part of our brain, and it is responsible for higher level activities like thinking, perceiving, voluntary actions, etc. And cerebrum controls our intelligence, our emotions, voluntary actions, learning, etc. Then hypothalamus. Hypothalamus acts as the relay station that directing the sensory signals towards the cerebrum. Then the last part of forebrain is thalamus. Thalamus regulates our thirst, hunger, sleep, etc. Then the next part and the second part of the brain is midbrain. Midbrain is the middle part of the brain, which is present between the forebrain and the hindbrain. Its main function is to connect the forebrain and the hindbrain. It also help us to alert the body. Then the last part of the brain is hindbrain. Hindbrain is the lowest part of the brain. It is present at the back of the brain to the spinal cord. And the parts of hindbrain are cerebellum. Cerebellum controls the coordination movement of our body. It controls the posture, etc. Then we have pons. Pons act as the relay station. It relays the message between the different parts of the body, and it also controls the breathing and our sleep cycle. Then the last part of the hindbrain is medulla. Medulla is responsible for controlling some involuntary actions like heartbeat, controlling our blood pressure, salivation, vomiting, etc. Then our last topic is protection of brain and spinal cord. Our brain is protected from the three membranes called meninges with a fluid called cerebrospinal fluid that acts as the shock absorber, and it helps us to prevent the brain from the damage. And how our spinal cord is prevented? Our spinal cord is protected from our backbone, and it is also surrounded by the three membranes called meninges, and a fluid is also there, that is cerebrospinal fluid, that cushions it and prevents it from damage. Thank you.